and welcome to the Stran Show. My guest today is, well, the chairman of the Secondary Students' Union of Northern Ireland, also known as SSUNI. I have got that right, Cormac, haven't I?
Yeah.
Yes, it is Cormac Savage. Hello, Cormac, how are you?
Hey, David.
So, Cormac, I've known you since the summer, where this really came about, this topic of a a student union for the secondary school pupils came around. So, what exactly is it, and who are you, and what is your role within it?
Yeah, well, I'm the union president, and I was sort of the one that founded the union and got together what is now our student executive, which is a group of students from across Northern Ireland from a variety of backgrounds. We function pretty much as you'd expect a students' union to. We have different officer roles, different structures, and we're working on campaigns that are relevant to students in Northern Ireland. How did we really come about? That was probably a lot of frustration at how decisions were being taken about education in Northern Ireland, which is by and large without the consultation of young people. And that's a real problem because we're those who the decisions will affect the most, especially decisions like closing schools, cancelling exams, predicted grades. And, that was interesting that then the first thing our union ended up working on was the Trust Our Teachers campaign, which a lot of people will remember was the A-level grades fiasco of the summer with the algorithm that needed overturned. We launched on the 12th of August and the A-level results came out on the 13th. So we were sort of thrown right into the deep end of, advocating for students. And that was where we really began as a union. But right now we're growing membership and getting ready, and all the things that need to be done in a students' union when you first set out. But we're very, very hopeful for how the future's going. We've been set up 6 months now, and we think we've achieved so much and been able to do so much. So it's been really good.
Absolutely. Just for something that's only been set up for 6 months, especially a student union, you have really made waves, not just within schools, but also in politics. But you have been a very vocal role, like people might recognize your voice and maybe recognize your name from on the radio. So, if you don't mind me asking, what experience have you got that's led you to feel like I know where I want this union to go towards?
Yeah, well, we had a lot of guidance in the beginning. When we were, I'll be brutally honest. I had an idea for a secondary students' union based on something that exists across Europe that we just don't have here in Northern Ireland. It doesn't exist in the UK either, but across Europe, we have, nearly every country has a secondary students' union. And I, had this idea, and I got in contact with the secondary students' union in Dublin in the Republic of Ireland, and they were so helpful. They put me on route to a document, which is more or less how to set up a secondary student union. I read it cover to cover, and then I have to say the Irish second level students union were such a great support. They really helped us get off the ground in the beginning and gave us all the support and advice we need for how to set ourselves up, promoting ourselves. But yeah, as far as everything else goes, I think SSUNI has managed to be really vocal, and that's really, really important because while we're about representing students, running campaigns on their behalf, we are as much about getting the voice of students out there. And I suppose our challenge is to get it listened to and not just heard. But we've been, I think as a union, we've had representatives on UTV, BBC, the Nolan Show. I think every show on BBC Radio, and just yesterday we had two of our executive, me and our mental health officer, and some people from our mental health working group on BBC Radio Ulster at 4 o'clock. So they're working our socks, but it's totally enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about the pupil's voice and like speaking up and making your voice heard. Now, not many. Some people may know this about you as well. You were also a member of the Youth Parliament. Is that experience in the Youth Parliament, especially because that's just a very political kind of standpoint, that to help you to kind of also not just make contacts, but also in the experience of how to actually communicate with politicians and how to effectively communicate, well, not just with adults, but also with the young people you represent?
Absolutely. I suppose being in the Youth Parliament, you learn certain skills, public speaking, interacting with the media, because that it does sort of become part of your role. But you learn how to interact with schools when you need them to, because you've part of it, we run the Make Your Mark ballot through schools, so learn how to interact with schools. And it was really largely about experience. The experience gained was very, very transferable, I found, when founding SSUNI, and sort of that learning how you interact with decision makers when you need them to do something for you, which has been really, really useful. I think back to a lot of the campaigns we've run, and maybe you would have had MLAs who weren't necessarily in the beginning totally agreeing with you and were a bit skeptical of the position you were taking. And it's really about how Youth Parliament gave me sort of the confidence and the know-how to be able to ring those MLAs, talk down the phone to them for 10 minutes and have them come off the phone with, well, you've given me a lot to think about. So I always think if you get well, you've given me a lot to think about, you've done something right. So
yeah, you mentioned it about like just talking to MLAs. So what actually, not to sound pessimistic here, but what exactly has the SSUNI actually achieved? What have they went out and actually done?
Sorry, we've achieved so much. I said earlier, from our first day, we were working on Trust Our Teachers, which was obviously, I would definitely deem it a success. The only shame was that it took a few days for decision makers to come to the move to implement the teachers' grades. But that was sort of part one for us. Since then, we lobbied the economy minister on extra university places and mental health funding for our secondary students who were transferring into third level education. And we got a letter from her in which she announced 2,000 extra places over 3 years for Northern Irish universities, which is great. It came as a consequence of the predicted grades last year, but still great. And she also announced £2.4 million in mental health funding, which we were totally over the moon about. And so it was really about supporting our second level students moving to third level education. Aside from that, we ran a successful campaign to cancel exams this year, so that was massive. We joined in November of this year with the Children's Commissioner, Kulia Sima, and we issued a joint call with her that exams should be cancelled. She worked very closely with us on that policy of hers, and on student experience, because she's always guided by the voices of young people. And we issued a joint call with her, and obviously, as everyone listening, I assume will know, that was not the end of the exam debate for 2021. Then I suppose we had England, Scotland, and Wales making significant changes to their exams this year. Northern Ireland was not. So that started a massive campaign that we called #CutTheContent. we like our 3-word hashtags, and then we secured that. We got our victory for Cut the Content, and then eventually, I suppose, we pushed the boat out further, and the decision makers did decide to cancel exams. So we were absolutely over the moon.
Just on the topic of this year's exams, it is really an in-topic conversation, not just within places like Stranmillis, where it's got to teach us in training, and it's not just in schools, but just in general community, in the general community we live in. People are talking about, well, what about our young ones, and what about students and examinations? Where do the SSUNI actually stand in this argument
on exams?
Yeah, because obviously there's exam alternatives in terms of getting marks.
Yeah.
What did the SSUNI stand on the actual assessment of the students?
Well, we've been calling for a robust system of predicted grades that put our teachers at the heart of it, really trust our teachers to know what's best for our students. And we also want a system where our students can lift their grades in August and be fully confident that the grades that they've received are the grades that they deserve. We don't want any student to feel like they don't know where their grade came from. They don't know why their grade is as low or as high as it is. What we want is a system of calculated grades where students can really be confident in what they've been given and understand. And a big thing is understand what they've been given and where that's come from, and how the teacher hasn't just plucked a grade from thin air. We didn't hear many stories of teachers plucking grades from thin air even last year. But what we want is for students to be safe in the knowledge that my grade is what I deserve. Here is how my teacher arrived at it based on 3 pieces of work. I think we have the benefit of hindsight this year, and calculated grades, as I think SSUNI proved in August, was a massive mess last year because we implemented the algorithm and that did not work. So where we are now, I think we need to use that hindsight to our advantage, and we need to, while we design the system, consult teachers and consult students, which is massive. I mean, I think any student could have told you last year that the algorithm would have been messy. Any student could have told you that it wouldn't have worked. And I think going forward, that's a lesson to learn, that we need to talk to our students and teachers about the systems we're bringing in for the system that they know so well. They are in our schools every day more than any policy maker is. So it's important that we, reach out to them. And that's probably, I would argue, one of the key points that I would like to drive home about what should happen with exams this year. Just young people are listened to and heard,
Yeah. Now, I'm gonna play a bit of devil's advocate here. Um, just to add a bit of controversy, just to kind of just to add a bit more content. And now, obviously, the algorithm came in last year, but last year there was a section of the year where the education was deemed, well, in a sense, normal. But now you've had a year of online learning. Learning has been inconsistent in some schools as well. Publicized. I'm not. I like to point out. I'm not blaming schools. I'm not blaming teachers. I'm not blaming politics. It's just the fact of the situation is we're on a very uneven ground. How would you in terms of trusting teachers and getting the trusting teachers? And obviously, I do trust teachers, and I know you yourself trust teachers, and it's important that we trust the teachers. But how can we provide an equal playing field for all students going forward and applying for university?
Well, I think the easiest way to provide that system would have been to have a blanket system across the UK that was brought in all 4 regions. But that hasn't happened. And that largely hasn't happened because of the indecision of people with the authority to make those decisions. If we could have had in November, when Wales first cancelled exams and were designing their replacement system, and when we issued our call with SSUNI, which was around the same time, we should have had at that point a system where all 4 regions would adopt the same system to make university admissions fair. They could have each diverged at GCSE, but at A level we should have had some consistency there. But while we don't, I think it's really about ensuring that one region doesn't over-regulate.
Okay, yeah.
And last year we tried to do the algorithm to bring the grades in line with where they've been in previous years, and again, it obviously didn't work. But I think the key thing is that one region isn't reducing their grades dramatically if they are trying to implement these, these regulations this year to make sure the grades aren't overly inflated, but on a Northern Ireland level, how we ensure university admissions are fair, it's definitely all in the system they design. And, I'm not the expert on exams and assessment and how we assess students, but CCEA are, and I'm sure they can come up with a system that is going to really help our students through this time, because this year has been so difficult for students, and I think exams would have just been emotionally traumatic for a lot of students to try and do after the amount of learning they've missed. So I would like to believe that they'll come up with a system that is fair to all students. It doesn't put them under too much stress and is evidence-based is probably the key thing. We would like to see something evidence-based that will ensure that there is, consistency across the board.
Absolutely. Very good answer. Sorry to put you under the pressure there. I realised it was quite a tough question there. As a union, student union, if people first heard the idea, oh no, there's a secondary student union of Northern Ireland, it's going to be very much against the teachers. In a sense, it's very much been the opposite. It's more been trust the teacher's voice. Is that something that you definitely had in mind when you're setting up, that this is not an organisation to go very much against teachers and to force teachers out, but instead to actually support the teachers?
Absolutely. I mean, we have a board. We have a board in our organisation that sits above the executive, and it's of sort of, adults with a lot of experience in education, very well-renowned people who have been very important in advising the work that we've been doing and being really there for us to ask for advice. And, on that board is quite deliberately 2 teaching union representatives. We have Mark Langhammer, who's the regional secretary of the NAU, which is the largest education union in Europe. So, we never planned to be against teachers. If you look at the big picture stuff in education, mental health reform, student councils, everything that we've experienced throughout the pandemic, teachers and students are generally on the same side of things. I think that the narrative teachers against students is actually a bit outdated now. I think what we find is that students and teachers in principle will generally agree on most things when it comes to big picture stuff in education, because teachers and students have not the same experience, but they're in the same classrooms, they're in the same schools, they see the same things, they hear the same things. There's definitely a collegiality between those two groups that I think a lot of people outside of education wouldn't maybe expect. But I mean, no, we never set out, never planned to be, anti-teacher. We have Mark, obviously from the NEU, and then we've recently had another addition to our board, which is Dr. Graham Galt of the National Association of Head Teachers. We very much want to be a force alongside our teaching unions and our head teachers unions rather than one against them, because a lot of our priorities are going to be exactly the same, and we've consistently engaged with all of the teaching unions. So
that collaboration will definitely be useful moving forward, and you're talking about to have the ideas around the same policies. So what exactly is the plans on moving forward? Is there anything the SSUNI want to move forward and want to look into and want to improve for students going forward?
Absolutely. Well, I like to joke we've sort of been trying to play 3 matches of football at once this year, because we've been trying to deal with being a secondary students union during a pandemic is number one, which is a massive undertaking in itself, because there are so many things that are affecting students and so much that needs to be made and so much pressure that permanently needs to be put on. But second to that, there is the running a new secondary students union. You're trying to do all the things like grow membership and ensure legitimacy and sustainability, and that sustainability is massive because we want this union to go on for a very long time. And the third one is you're trying to be a normal secondary students union. You're trying to work on policies like mental health, student councils, the things that have impacted our students for a long time when they haven't had this voice here to advocate on their behalf. So I think that's no accident that some of the first things we did were in that third category, and we really wanted to be able to still be normal throughout the pandemic. So our working group meetings are over Zoom, but they still happen. We've had our education officer, James Kane, has been running a student working group on student councils. It's called Student Councils That Work, and it's about how we reform our student councils for the future and how we make them better and make our schools listen to them more and have them not become just something that has to exist because it has to exist, and rather than that, an actual pupil forum within each school. So we'll be launching a report on that and some documents to support teachers and students in student councils, hopefully next month or the month after. And the other working group we've been running has been massively successful as well. We've been running a group called Mental Health Matters, led by our mental health officer, Morgan Shuttleworth. And they ran a survey of young people in Northern Ireland, students, on mental health, and in 24 hours received 1,000 responses. And then by the time it closed, the survey received 2,100 responses. So we were totally thrilled by that, but also quite concerned, because so many of our young people were interested enough in mental health to fill out that survey. And the results were concerning, but they've given us a lot to go forward with on the area of mental health. And we've been working with Pivotal Public Policy Forum, which is Northern Ireland's leading independent think tank. And they have been putting a lot of the data that we have alongside us into a report that we're going to be launching at an event very soon. So there'll be more detail on that coming. A lot of what we're doing through that data we collected from students on their opinions on mental health, on their experience of mental health in our schools, but a lot of it was so deeply personal, is working to reform the way we look at mental health in schools, the way we approach mental health in schools, and the way we treat students who are suffering from mental health conditions in schools. So I think a lot of what we do is going to be as much about policy reform and making schools better for our students as it is about representing them in the everyday issues that are happening. Everyday issues during a pandemic, I suppose. But yeah, I think what we do is definitely a broad church.
It sounds very interesting. I look forward to reading quite a few of those reports, actually, especially the mental health report. It's very something that's, especially this year and the end of last year, was something that was vitally important. and something that really, in a way, not I wouldn't say overlooked, but something that was very much, I wouldn't say it kind of just put not really back burner kind of in the sense.
I think it was
It was there, but it wasn't really looked towards in a sense by a lot of people.
It was definitely mental health was something that throughout the pandemic definitely was. I mean, I think pre-pandemic we all talked about the mental health epidemic in Northern Ireland. You know, people were concerned that Northern Ireland wasn't spending as much percentage of our health service on mental health. People were concerned that Northern Ireland had the highest rates of PTSD in the world. You know, people were beginning to tune in to the idea of mental health, and then the pandemic hit, and people became so much more, obviously, preoccupied with physical health then, and COVID and lockdowns. And I think mental health sort of did step backwards a wee bit and become a bit secondary. So what we want to ensure is that when we come out of this pandemic and school returns to normal, we go to a new normal that's going to be good for our students with mental health. And, you know, we want to use this pandemic and the disruption to school as an opportunity to really reform some of the systems that our students are telling us are broken. You know, we had 20% of students 20.9% of students tell us that the counselling services, that if they've used them, and they rated them and they said theirs were a 1 out of 10, very poor. You know, that's concerning. You know, I think that is going to maybe involve a deeper probing of what's wrong, what can we do better. So, you know, we've been trying to use a lot of sort of anecdotal evidence for why students thought that. What is wrong with the way we're doing counselling in schools at the minute? Do we need to reform how we help and support students with, you know, mental health problems in schools, and should counselling not be the first intervention? You know, is that trying to use a one-size-fits-all approach for something that's not one-size-fits-all? So I have to say, I've learned a lot working with Morgan, our mental health officer, on everything that working group has been doing, but it has been totally eye-opening to, you know, the problems that we're facing and how we get through them.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, it's clear to see from you talking and just listening to that there is definitely a plan moving forward in the sustainability, and it's something that will probably be looked back, and like you talk about sustainability in 10 years' time, you're probably going to look back at this moment and think this is the moment that really made the SSUNI, and it's something as a student of Stranmillis that I can look and I can say that's something that's really impressive, something that's really making a name. And I have to say congratulations to you and your team and your executive and your board and everything, and members of the union, just for sticking up and saying, here, I've got a voice, and the voice of a child and the voice of a teenager and the voice of a student is vitally important moving forward. Yeah, I just want to say congratulations and thank you very much for coming and talking with us, Cormac.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been great.
Yeah, and thank you very much. Obviously, if you have any questions, leave it in the comment below. Well, get back to you. Maybe Cormac might get back to you if you're lucky enough. But thank you very much for joining us, and see you later.
Thank you. See ya.